Welcome back to Jane's Stories of Life. Within the next few weeks, I'm going to be taking another cruise. And one of the features of that cruise will be that one night there will be a Motown night. As many of you know, I lived in Detroit for 2 years. And I tell people anytime, those were the most exciting 2 years of my life. My 4 years in college were the best years of my life. Those 2 years in Detroit were the most exciting. One of the scholarships that I had for college required that I teach in Cleveland for 1 year or pay the scholarship back. So the year after I finished, I did teach in Cleveland, but I was ready to make a move, and I wasn't sure where I wanted to move to. But Detroit ended up being my choice. I didn't know anyone there. I just knew that it was a thriving city, that it had a reputation for being a great place to live. It was within 4 or 5 hour drive from Cleveland. And so it was just a good location. And I applied, received a job right away as a kindergarten teacher. So at the end of that first year of teaching, packed up everything and moved to Detroit. I was fortunate. I found a nice apartment. There were only 8 apartments in that building. I enjoyed the job that I had, and I ended up, making new friends. I was involved with the Delta chapter in Detroit. I just had a ball. It was just a fantastic experience. Maybe it was because I was, young, single, new girl in town, whatever it was, I had a good time in Detroit. The city itself was exciting. It's many of the advantages of a larger city, of course. It was larger than Cleveland, a whole new, everything was new. Entertainment was fantastic. Motown had been established. Hitsville, USA was started by Berry Gordy in 1959. So by 1965, when I moved to Detroit, things were really popping. I happened to see the Temptations at the Michigan State Fair. And I was very close. We were just it was like a raised platform almost. We were standing right there in front of the stage. I mean, they were just kind of starting out. Coble Hall was the major convention center in Detroit, and I happened to go to a concert there and saw James Brown and his that wasn't even his heyday. He was really just beginning that crossover into mainstream music. I tell you, James Brown put on a show. That was an exciting night. Detroit had one of the other people that I saw there in a very small club was John Coltrane. It was so loud, it's a wonder the building stood, the vibration of John Coltrane. I was not a John Coltrane fan, but guess what? That's where my date took me. We had a nice time. And he was, well-known jazz artist even then. The, pardon me, shopping, then I used to love to shop. I loved the downtown stores. I loved Hudson Department Store. Northland Shopping Mall was, at that point, one of the largest enclosed shopping malls in the country. And it was not too far from where I lived. So, that was another exciting thing about Detroit. I had a friend who also found a job teaching in Detroit. She happened to live a block away from where my apartment was. Her apartment was a block away, and so we did a lot of things together. It was funny because when I started teaching, the first day of school, there was a Sora who was also my same age. She had just been teaching there a year. Her name was Janet. One of the people that I became close to in my apartment building's name was Janice. She was a music teacher in Detroit. So it was Jane, Janice, Janet, and the friend that lived around the corner's name was Jean. So we were the 4 J's. Really confusing sometimes talking about, my friends and their names. I wasn't really into sports at that point. I had to pass Tiger Stadium every day on my drive to work, but I wasn't really into any other sports. Of course, I had been in college, but otherwise, sports weren't that important to me at that point. What made me move back to Cleveland, of course, as many of you know, while I lived in Detroit, Morgan moved to the city of Cleveland and moved into the apartment building my mother lived in. And so Mother Cupid called me one weekend and she said, this nice young man just moved into the apartment building this week. And I said, I'll come home this weekend. I'm going to check him out. And the rest of that is history. All of that story of our romance and my move back to Detroit can be found in both of my books. But and that was strong because as much as I loved Detroit, I saw more of a future with Morgan than I did in staying in the city of Detroit. But it was a wonderful, wonderful time. The unfortunate urban unrest happened 1 week after I left the city. And I was heartbroken because if you know the history of that period of time, some classified it as urban unrest, some viewed it more as a race riot. There was an uprising. A lot of the businesses and neighborhoods were destroyed by fires, and a lot of looting and all kinds of things. Detroit took years to begin to rebuild because the auto industry, just like the industry in Cleveland, depended on the steel production and things like that. Economically, both of those cities suffered greatly during the late 60s. I lived there from 65 to 67. And I was so sad, even, 10 years later when I would go back, or even 20 years later, we were back for a Delta convention. The city was just beginning to revitalize again. And unfortunately, its reputation took quite a hit during that time as well. But anyway, I'm looking forward. Let me go back to the cruise and Motown. I loved, of course, all the Motown music. I mean, Motown changed the music scene. Motown music is classic, and I know that of all ages, you're familiar with much of the music that came out during the 60s and the groups that came out, and it was just an exciting era to live in. So I can't wait for the Motown night on the Carnival celebration, which I will be going on very soon. As a matter of fact, the two friends that are going on the same cruise, we have already ordered our t-shirts with the Motown motif, so I will be sure to show those to you, showing you my shirt when I come back. Okay. Cherish your memories. My fondest memory. I love the city of Detroit, and people kind of look at me strange. You love Detroit? I sure did. I had a ball there. So cherish your memories and pass them on.